Yo, so judging from NPM downloads, there's about 8 million people per week using Tailwind CSS. And there's about 1.8 million, so way less people using the tool I want to talk about in this video. And dude, I'm no math genius, right? But 8 million, 1.8 million, like, that's not a lot. And I'm guilty. I knew about this tool months ago, but I didn't use it. And now that I finally got started using it in my projects, goddamn dude, it's pretty good. They just published a super nice quality of life improvement update on Twitter, and I took that as the opportunity to finally talk about the tool because I think you're gonna like it. Alright, so here's the deal, right? Prettier, a super useful tool when it comes to code formatting, does not care about your class names by default. If I said hello world right here, and then we did some formatting using Prettier, which is pre-installed in basically every project that you do, well, bam, the class name did not actually change. If there were like a lot of spaces here, then the file itself would be formatted, right? These spaces, but nothing inside of quotes, like the class name, for example. And honestly, that's cool, because how should Prettier know that this is something you want it to address? And if you do want it, well, that's available as a plugin. And this plugin is by no means a secret, right? The Prettier plugin, Tailwind CSS, but they just published a pretty nice new update, and the setup is really easy to the degree that I just feel silly for not using it earlier. We just install the package, let's create a new file, and that's gonna be a .prettierrc, where we can basically define some rules that Prettier applies throughout our project, and wabam, we just put the plugin right in here. And that's it, right? If we now format this, we can already see that the spaces are removed. So not only does Prettier now apply to the entire file, right? And it removes all the excess spaces and so on, but it now also applies to the actual class name, whatever is in quotes. And by the way, this removal of extra spaces is one of the new features they just introduced in the plugin that we're gonna talk about in this video. But arguably the coolest thing the plugin does is automatically sort your class names, right? So let's say we had a padding of 4 and a padding top of 2 in this order. What do we expect to happen when we format this file? And to understand that, it's really cool to understand how Tailwind sorting works by default. Because let's imagine we did not have any kind of class name in our project, right? What is the CSS that is generated by Tailwind? We can very easily find out. Let's create a production version of our app. Right here, let's navigate into the dist assets, and there it is. There is our generated CSS file. Where does this come from? Basically just from our main index.css, where we include Tailwind, right? Just with these 3 lines of code, what is actually generated under the hood in our build is this. Wow, that looks really ugly, you might say, and hell yeah, you're right, this does look really ugly, but once we format it, all this does is basically reset a lot of the default browser styles across different browsers as well to meet the Tailwind standard. So it just looks way better out of the box. And then all styles that are used in our project dynamically are put at the very, very bottom right down here. So there's about 300 lines of CSS cleanup generated by default in Tailwind CSS. And only the classes we actually use, let's say text red 500, are then just in time JIT compiled into this CSS file. Let's see what that looks like. Let's build this project. This is gonna, you'll notice this is gonna create a new CSS file to avoid caching, right? So it puts a little hash at the end here so we don't get any weird caching behavior. And if we now go into this new CSS file, until line 333, everything is gonna stay the exact same, right? It's the default Tailwind stuff, but then we can see the text red 500 is generated, so only the CSS that we actually use in our project is put into the CSS file. And that's exactly the point. So the order matters. CSS is cascading. It's literally in the name, right? So the order matters a lot. And the order in which this plugin sorts or class names by default is in this order. First, the base styles, then the components, and then the utilities. So utilities would be, for example, a padding 2, a padding 4, and so on. That is utilities. And that's the order that our classes are styled. So to answer the question from before, if we had a padding of 4 and a padding top of 2, well, the padding top of 2 overrides the padding of 4, at least on the top, right? So if we format this, we expect, there we go, I just formatted it, but you can't tell because we expect nothing to change. But if we put the padding top before the padding 4, then first we have the changing style and then the default style. And that order goes against the Tailwind philosophy of how things should be ordered, right? So once I format this, bam, you just saw it, the order gets switched around. So first the general styles and then the kind of overriding styles. Or take this example, we have a shadow of large and a margin left of 2 and a flex. What order should this class name be in? In the Tailwind logic of things, first we want to see immediately the stuff that actually changes the layout. Because while the shadow large might actually look good in your app, it doesn't actually affect the layout at all, right? So once we format this, bam, the margin left goes first because that has the largest effect on the layout. Then comes the flex because that determines how things are ordered. And lastly, the purely visual stuff that, is not important for layout. So it can go at the very last. Now, what if we had a custom class name in here? This is super important. This is if you want to add custom backgrounds and so on. These should always be at the first place because they're unusual, right? These can really mess with your styles and these should always be first. So they're the easiest to see. And I really agree with this philosophy. I think it makes it so easy to read Tailwind class names. Imagine it was like this. On hover, we have a text red 500 and normally we have a text green of 500. Does it really make sense to have the class names in this order where first we have the overriding style and then the default style? I don't think so. So pseudo selectors like hover or like focus and all the other ones that we have in Tailwind are always put at the very end. What if we had a grid where on small devices we want to have grid calls of 3, but by default we're going to have grid calls of 2? Should it be this way? Hell no, right? I think you get the idea. You get the point, right? So the overriding, the conditionals are always put at the very end. So let's say this was our Tailwind, right? Let's see what is generated in our index.css at line 334. Bam, there we are. That's exactly the same order, interestingly enough, that we have in our app.tsx, right? So these match. We have the grid, then the grid calls to, then the conditional. Same exact order as right here. So it's very intuitive if you're familiar with CSS and its cascading behavior, how Tailwind classes should be sorted. And this plugin, it just does it for you. Oh, by the way, one thing I didn't mention in the video that's also new in the update, right? It's not only that now this removes the extra spaces in your class name, which is by far the cooler part of the new update, right? But it also removes duplicate class names. So if you have two BG red of 500s, for example, then you format the file, you only have one. Is that a big deal? No, because the second time you mention that class name, it would already be underlined, like with a squiggly underline, right? So let me know what you think. I've been totally sleeping on this tool and I wish I hadn't, but it is what it is. All right, that's gonna be it for this video. I really hope you enjoyed and I'm gonna see you in the next one. Until then, have a good one and bye-bye.